right or wrong, the context that I normally have to paint for driven men is explaining to them that their marriage is a multiplier. If you can get this area right, it is the best 10x strategy that more than any other thing in your life. So having that context of why it's so important can help them to settle, like, okay, you're talking in my good ear now.
Hello, we're so excited to start today's episode with Kelly Clements. Kelly, could you introduce yourself to us?
Of course. My name is Kelly Clements. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys today. I am really looking forward to discussing the role of entrepreneurship and marriage. So I work with entrepreneurs and their spouses. I started coaching entrepreneurs way back in 2004 when I began working with Dan Sullivan and the Strategic Coach. And I noticed way back then that my clients fell into one of two camps. Those that counted their spouse or their marriage as their greatest asset, and those that didn't. So I saw from day one in my coaching career how important the love relationship was to the business. I believe that marriage is a multiplier. And so in 2012, I started my own coaching company, still coaching entrepreneurs in their business, but this time with an emphasis on their marriage. And so spouses are always welcome to participate in my coaching. So some of my entrepreneurial clients that I coach in their business, I also work with their spouses on a personal business.
Why the hell would you volunteer for such a crazy? Been doing the same thing for 30 years, and I have seen some very interesting entrepreneurial marriages. Some of them amazing, but that is the rare case. Most of them are, clinically speaking, a show. What got you into it?
I always say that my professional background or experience taught me how to coach, but it was my personal experience that taught me why both people really need coaches. And so when I was working at Strategic Coach and my eyes were open to the entrepreneurial world and how much freedom was available, freedom was available in terms of time, money, relationships, energy, pursuits, I got bit by the entrepreneurial bug, and I would come home every single day after work talking to my then husband about businesses that I wanted to start. We could do this together, and we could do that together. And I was really hitting my growth curve. And he humored me at first, but then after my second son was born and I was still chomping at the bit to do something together, he finally looked at me one day and he said, "Kelly, why do you always need more? Why can't this just be enough for you?" And that's when I realized we were going in two very different directions. And that would start what I call the ambition gap that we eventually got swallowed up by. And so in my next relationship, in my infinite wisdom.
That's too gold. I gotta stop you. Ambition gap. What a wonderful way to say that. So he wasn't driven so much, huh?
He was not. He was, he has the gift of contentment, and he could be present, and he could be in the moment of what we had. And in that stage of my life, I judged it as laziness. And, especially because the male-female dynamic, that was at play too. I think when women are more driven than their husbands, it creates a completely different set of complexities. I didn't have the words to say this then, but I know what I was really missing was having a space to be in my feminine. And again, I didn't have those words. I didn't have that frame of reference. I just knew that I felt like I always had to be the man. I was always the one making the decisions and figuring things out. And what about this? And leading the charge. So I would have told you back then that we just wanted different things. But what I really missed was strong masculine leadership that could hold me. I'm not saying that he wasn't masculine, but I had way more masculine energy than he did.
So you hear me laughing, but Rachel's going to jump in here, I'm sure, any second. So driven women, it takes a lot of divine masculine to hold how much energy a driven woman has. I mean, that is I would strongly agree with that. But in your practice, most of the people coming to you, it's a driven man with the non-driven or the non-driven identified woman.
Yes. And here's why. It was because in my next relationship, I swung to the total opposite end of the spectrum with somebody who could hold my feminine. We were equally driven, equally weird, equally passionate. And so in the beginning, it was explosive. Like I talk about 1 + 1 = 3 synergy. Like we had 1 + 1 = 100, like just chemistry. And it was intoxicating at first. And that thing that I initially fell in love with eventually became the thing that swallowed us whole. I had gone from one extreme of being hyper driven to the other extreme of like, why can't we just take a breather? Like, it's just one crisis after another. Like, can we just take a break? And I had lost, and then he looked at me one day and he said, what happened to Kelly? What happened to the woman I fell in love with, the one that could walk into any room and just light it up? And I was like, I'm on the floor waiting for the crumbs of your attention to fall. I'm not just some doll that you take on and off the shelf. Like, I am exhausted. I'm increasingly lonely. And so I had gone from one extreme of hyper alpha to the other extreme of hyper beta. And I was like, there has to be a way. And so the reason why my client base has morphed into mostly driven men is because I can equally relate to both people. You know, I can look at the wife of an entrepreneur who from the outside looking in looks like you have an amazing life. You get to travel, you have freedom, you can homeschool your kids. Like, there's all of these opportunities available to you. But what they don't know is that the brightest lights often cast the darkest shadows. And so it's the wife that's often left dealing with the shadow side of entrepreneurship, because the traits that make an entrepreneur successful in business are the same traits that are tough at home. And so she's dealing with the brunt of it. And so when I can see her and I'm like, I know you probably feel like you're on eggshells. You probably feel like business gets the best of him and you get the rest of him. It looks amazing on the outside and you're lonely as hell. And so I can relate to both people. And that's how my practice has really morphed into that dynamics. I do occasionally have it where the woman is the more driven one. And I find that those dynamics are a lot harder to coach because she's so mad. It's really hard to get her to thaw and begin to trust him to rise up, because she is just pissed that she's been carrying all of this work. So to get her to thaw is a longer run rate to get them to a place where they can even start to morph.
Beautiful. I'm gonna let Rachel jump in on that. Why are they so angry, Rachel?
Yeah, so Dr. Doug and I have been speaking about this and trying to delve into this, and we find that driven women that haven't done their work tend to look very angry, and they create this wall around themselves. And I think it is because of, the history of men and women, right? Men were out there hunting and doing the work. Women were protectors, staying home, and breaking out of that is a lot. Breaking through ceilings, trying to walk into a room full of guys and being respected and not objectified takes so much work that by the time you get there, you're like, I got this. I don't need anybody's help. I don't want to trust anybody into my personal space because I have to protect this so hard. And I think driven in itself is masculine.
It's a penetrative energy. And I think another thing that driven women encounter is they get into professional situations where like a lot of my male clients, because, and Dr. Doug, you talk about this in your book, there's potential to maximize everywhere. It's like, I come home from I'll hear from the husband, I come home and it's like, you could have been doing so much. We could have been doing so much more. And he's looking to maximize all the ways that his spouse can be contributing more. You're so talented. You could monetize this. And she is exhausted and she doesn't want to monetize it. She's like, I have to put all of my life force into just managing the kids because we're scared of you, or we don't know when the other shoe is going to drop. I don't have the energy to go out and think about a new business right now. And so the husband starts to run this story. It would be so much better if I was with somebody who is ambitious as me. And they get into the workforce and they see driven women and it's like, that's what I want. It would be so much easier. And so the driven woman is now in a work environment where driven men are like, that's amazing. You're so talented. And she's getting hyped up at work. But then when she goes home, again, that thing that's making her successful in business is causing that ambition gap at home. The husband probably feels emasculated. So there's probably a fair degree of resentment on her. I don't care what you're doing in the world. I love you. I love your heart. I remember our early days, like everything that you're doing now is great, but I fell in love with the woman who can like help me create this family life at home. And I'm getting less and less of her. So that's layered onto the anger that she's experiencing.
Those dopamine hits, right? And Kelly, you talk a lot about that in your book. How do we create that when a spouse comes home, they get that spark? Because when we're driven, we're out in the world. people are complimenting driven entrepreneurs. You're the boss, you're the visionary. Heck, we built whole businesses around one person's vision, right? And then they come home and there's that other person there that's like, wait, you just walked in the door? Great, help with the kids, do this. And it's boring. It's not exciting. And that's where that gap happens. And I also speak to a lot of women that tell me, my husband says I should do this and I should do that. And they try, what they really want is they want to have a passion. They don't want to have a business because they want to be taken care of. But the entrepreneur feels like, what do you mean? Entrepreneurship is awesome. Like everybody should be an entrepreneur, right? So you're going to feel great too. So you should become an entrepreneur too. And that's where this gap happens, where the spouse is like, no, because I know how to decorate doesn't mean I want to become a professional decorator.
Sure.
Yep. So I need to jump in here. So the entrepreneur, the guy that's listening to this, he walks in the door and she's pissed and he has no idea why. And he's confused. He's busted his ass all day. He's in his mind, a guy's mind, we have gone out and killed things and worked for you. The only reason I'm going to work is for you. And yet you resent me for going to work. And that trap that we're in as entrepreneurial men. And it seems like no matter what we do, there's a landmine we're going to step on.
How much time do we have? Okay. Couple of things. Number one, part of this is the monkey elephant. You walk in the door, she's mad. It might not have nothing to do with you, but the first thought is, what did I do wrong? I'm in trouble now. She's not grateful. Defenses are straight up. I do all this for you. And so now all the egos are fighting.
Ego. It's the pride.
Yep. So curiosity, it's my favorite energy in relationships. Dr. Doug, you do an amazing job talking about this in your book, but when you can get curious, it's not, what did I do wrong? What did I do now? It's, what does she need? Like, obviously something's happening. If I can get really curious about what's happening, I can probably fix it. Or I might just need to listen. She might just need to hit the release valve because she's been worked up all day. So curiosity in that moment, genuine curiosity, not the passive aggressive curiosity, is important.
Not
I've been going
passive aggressive kind of curiosity.
Yeah.
A wonderful way to say that. Yeah, that's not curiosity, by the way. That's questioning and probing, and yeah, and women get on that. But it's so she's pissed off. I have no clue why. Does she know why?
It depends. It depends on how much work she's done and how much self-awareness she has. So maybe not. We
could sit there for a minute, because talking about big shadows, what happens often is that spouses lose who they are. And one part of being beta is not being in touch with yourself and your emotions, being able to verbalize and identify your emotions, because you're living for the other person. You're trying to please everybody but yourself, right? So it's like, you got to first come back home to yourself to be able to verbalize your emotions. What I find a lot of betas do is we deflect. We look at the other person and we're saying, you're not home, but really we're just exhausted.
This is a key point that I try to get my men to see. And I always joke, tattoo it on your arm. Feelings are not problems to solve. And so you walk in the door and, I do a chick whisper set of content really for men, trying to understand, if a woman's lips are moving, she's talking about her emotion. And to get a guy to walk through the door and be just curious about, I hear lots of feelings, but what is the real problem here? Most of my entrepreneurial guys, they're out running $100 million companies, but they walk in the door and they're completely clueless what to do. But it is so hard for them to do nothing and just listen.
Yes. And there's another layer on this. So if we're talking to the driven men, control the controllables, like let's really get to spaces where we can make it start to move the needle. Spouses may be really clear on what's wrong, but they have been so trained to avoid the landmines that they might not feel safe saying the exact thing that's wrong, because they don't want to hurt their feelings, because this annihilation energy a lot of drivens have. If somebody says, oh, it gets a little bit in my path, I'm going to annihilate them. And so spouses of driven entrepreneurs often know exactly what's wrong, but they don't feel safe communicating it, whether they know it or not, because it's like, here's what's really wrong. But if I tell him this, the punishment is not going to be worth it. So I'm just going to hold it in and stuff it down and push it away. And this creates this shell beta energy that I talk about, where they're so divorced from themselves that they begin to not realize what's going on in themselves because they question their own sanity.
Got it. So they're disconnected from their bodies as a way of protecting them from the landmines. And
Yes.
But let's talk about those landmines, because I think visionaries don't see themselves as having such big energy driven. So like, what do you mean? I just stated my opinion. But when a driven states their opinion, they state it in a very sure way. It makes everybody around them doubt themselves. So sometimes it's not like drivens aren't punitive. It's just they're going to come back with so much emotion and so much strength that beta feels crushed when they are just really just stating what they think are facts.
Sure.
And so it is, I always joke with all my drivens. It always sounds like someone is being condescending when they're really driven and they're impassioned. You know, and there's this, I can't believe you don't see it the way I see it kind of energy. And keeping that's misinterpreted by wives. How? What do they hear?
What do wives hear when?
So I walk in the door and and my attitude is, I can't believe you're pissed at me again. I didn't do anything.
Okay. This is the core of it, I believe. To your point, he's walking out the door and he's putting all of his energy into the business to create this life. We can write a check to make any of our problems go away. What could you possibly be upset about? And here's one thing that's happening. Yes, you're going out the door and you're putting all of this energy into building this business. And so you can write a check for the landscaper and home repairs and travel agents, but we're not doing life together. When I tell you I want to redo the dining room and you're like, great, hire an interior designer, like what I'm actually looking is to build something with you. I want to parent with you. I want to create the house with you. I want to work on the yard with you. And so they're seeing all of this life force go into the business, and then he's home and exhausted. And it's like, why are the kids upset? Why is the kitchen not clean? What have you been doing? Like, why is there more chaos at home? I need to. And so she's feeling like she's not good enough because, again, in this driven mind where nothing's ever good enough, women tend to get their identity from the people they spend the most time with. And so if her husband is in a constant state of nothing's good enough, what she hears is, I'm not good enough.
Right.
And so she's always in a tailspin. And so what this gap creates is, I want to do something with you. Like, let me do something together. It doesn't have to be in the business. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but give me some of this life force. And this is exactly where wives start to feel business gets the best of you. I get the rest of you. So eventually she does resent the business because it is getting the best of her partner. Simple flips here. And if we want to get to strategies, during free time, playing together, not dinner and a movie, because what are you talking about? The house, the kids, work, like you're digging that rut deeper and deeper. So getting out and playing together, play creates the same chemical reaction in the brain that flow state does. Entrepreneurs love flow state. Play can duplicate that, but it puts in oxytocin, which is the love hormone, that creating that bonding sense. So in your free time, having really high quality free time or playtime, you're getting a sense of working together, you're playing together, you're connecting. And so having, during your days off, if you have really engaging play activities, that can be super useful. I always encourage spouses to watch the compliment to criticism ratio. So there are plenty of
criticism ratio. Amen to that. And that is something I mean, it is so imperative to actually, for driven entrepreneurs, particularly founders, just because they're problem solving all day long.
Sure.
To point out 9 of the problems about the house that the wife didn't do versus the one thing that she did, or the 9 things that she did. It's just our brain. We don't even see it.
Yeah. Well, and Ms. Sullivan does a great job at The Gap in the Game talking about how to look for the good. Because here's the thing, when you come, you can tell yourself the story that your wife wasn't productive enough. Life would be so much better if she could just get some habits or structure into place. You know, we could be doing so much more if she were ... I'm sure that's true. I'm sure there are versions of her that is true. But most women also, you could run the same story of, holy cow, she's creating grounded children that are going to be part of my legacy. She's teaching our kids how to read. She's teaching our kids how to read nutrition labels. She's teaching our kids to be like outdoor adventurous. She's taking care of my aging parents. She's expanding her imagination through these novels that she loves to read, that's translating to the fantasies that we're having maybe in our personal lives. Like, you can also tell yourself the same story, and it's like, which version do you want? The same woman's in bed. Who do you want to wake up to?
If I can
And so
get a driven husband to actually become just profoundly curious about how much he really doesn't know his wife, and that capacity to actually get to know her. And I'm very common, and I wanted to go back to the comments you made about women losing themselves, because it is a driven man, and he's all of a sudden becomes curious, like, who are you and what do you like? And she just, like, is very common, baffling, like, I don't know.
yes.
Like, my
Yes.
kids are here, this is here, and it's like, we're on the outside going, well, I don't, I do gym every day and cold plunge and self-care, and here you are just overwhelmed. If I had free time like you, so we just don't understand, like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah. I think part of this, so the backstory here is that a lot of times women do have professional ambitions, or they like, yeah, I'm a great decorator. I would love to have the next Martha Stewart line. However, every time I collaborate with him, it's not good enough. I'm scared I'm not going to have the right answer. I'm not going to be ambitious enough. The goals aren't going to be high enough. I don't know what a KPI is. And so she compares herself to her husband,
Wow.
who is an extreme example. And so how a husband can get curious for who his wife is to allow her space to dabble, because she probably needs to figure it out. And the way that I talk to them about this is really understanding desire. Unfortunately, a lot of us who have come up with particularly religious context feel that desire can be a dirty word. I talk about desire as God's breadcrumbs leading us to our purpose. And if you look at the word desire, desire of the Father, I teach women to get really clear with how it feels in their body. Is this something that feels like you're relaxed, you're open, you're playful, you're getting into your pleasure center, you can laugh, and it takes a while to kick the rust off, but just start to dabble. This is maddening to a driven entrepreneur who's like, she starts all these things and she doesn't finish it. Here we go again. And it's like, yes, here we go again. The fact that she's still starting new things is good news, because once you've gotten to shell beta, you can barely get off the couch. Or if you're getting to that class that you signed up for, you're not even enjoying it because you're so depleted.
Yeah,
So
that learned
dabbling,
helplessness loop, and that learned helplessness is literally, no matter what I try, it's not going to work anyway, so why try it all?
exactly.
That
It's not going to be good
the
enough.
only way to do that, like you said, is the breadcrumbs. You got to, to start an exercise program. Oh, I'm going to go to the gym. No, you're going to put on your shoes.
Totally.
You proximal little tiny changes, and you keep them. And, as a driven man, we tend to, just do it. We're driven women. Actually, it's a much more fluid experience of developing this.
Yeah.
And I'm all in, and then we'll figure it out. No, that wasn't it. Women are like, yeah, I'm put my toe in, and then, but once a woman finds her passion, that's what I always joke with my driven men. It's like, get the hell out of the way.
Out.
Get out of the way.
And Dr. Doug, this is going to answer your question. You originally asked me is, how do you teach a man to get genuinely curious about his wife? Right or wrong, the context that I normally have to paint for driven men is explaining to them that their marriage is a multiplier. If you can get this area right, it is the best 10x strategy that more than any other thing in your life. So having that context of why it's so important can help them to settle, like, okay, you're talking in my good ear now. And it, like, you're not doing this because you want to 10x your business. You're doing this because you understand that this is the thing that's been in your way. Your marriage is going to be the dojo where you start to peel away that jagged edge that you think is driving you in your business. But when you can get safe in your marriage and you can start to open your heart in your marriage, which is the most dangerous thing, we're willing to go into cold plunges and do Ironman and climb Everest, but don't even ask me to get vulnerable with my spouse.
Get this message out to all the driven women, all women, and just in the world over. Do you guys know, how do you understand why we're so scared of you?
I do now.
How did you make that transition? Because it always baffles me why women don't understand that. I mean, we are so scared of hurting you. That's why we lie to you. That's why we do all
Sure.
these things, because I don't want to tell her the truth. Because if I told her really how much risk my business is under, she's going to lose her mind, and then I have to deal with another problem.
Sure.
It's the
And so
ultimate
that
protection.
it's you're asking for partnership, but you don't want to be my partner. We're too crazy.
Yeah, exactly. If you knew how bad I really was, you would run. It's also true that the thing that's bad about you is the thing that we know that we can alchemize if you trust us.
Oh, say that again. And yeah, lots more words.
That thing that you're working so hard to protect, we can see. It's the head in the sand. It's like we can see it. We know. And if you can lean into me together, we can alchemize it.
This multiplier that you know mentioned, and this is my experience with it when well, the hero's journey, the man's looking for his, you know, the thing that's going to heal him, the chalice, the arc or the you know, cup. And it is this chalice, you know, the Christ chalice, the healing chalice that we're in quest for. And that is, you know, at 16, we're out to find it in the world. At 45 years old, we find out that it's not in the world. Where is it? And then the inner journey begins. But we finally find this, you know, the Christ cup, you know, that he drank from the night before his healing. And we discover that it's empty. And in that emptiness, you know, where do we fill it is with our spouse, you know.
Yes.
And once you make that transition to see how unbelievably important and valuable she is to you, and I've worked with a lot of men that can get there.
Yep.
And then they bring this home and they're so appreciative and so awe-inspired. And the wife is like selfless,
Yes.
clueless, like, what the hell are you talking about? You've ignored me for 15 years now. And I got, you know, all of a sudden you want back into the family. What the hell?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
transition that this how do you make that transition with your women clients to get them to see that, you know, it's adoration and respect of why we lie to you. It's adoration and respect of why we treat you with kid gloves.
So I think the first thing is helping them understand how to communicate what their boundaries are. Here's why. When she starts setting boundaries, she feels a little bit more sturdy. You know, like if you know that you can just steamroll her all the time and it's like she's not going to push back, I have to be more contracted because I will run her off the cliff. But if she starts to push back a little bit, and this is just coming, I don't know if this is right or not. This might be why driven men want such driven women, because they can push back and get that tension. You know, maybe it feels a little bit safe because a driven woman will push him back. But so when I work with a spouse who I work on spectrums, I have the alpha spectrum and the beta spectrum. When I have a spouse that's really on the unhealthy end of the beta spectrum, like you have to push back a little bit. And I think that when a man knows that she's going to push back a little bit, she feels a little bit sturdier. Like maybe she won't actually break. And the more boundaries she holds, the firmer she is. And this is where that alchemy can happen, because there's a container. If there's not a container, we have a mess all over the desk.
Right.
Actually in her boundaries that she can start to communicate, where a man can feel safer. And this is always the messy middle, because now he's like, she's pushing back, there's a barrier, she's going to be my road to my success, she can't bring me down, and there starts to be a fight. And this is where the coach comes in, is to really help choreograph this dance so that it can get alchemized.
It
I think
is.
that's where the angry woman is. Like when we're, you know, maybe some women are stuck in that area for a long time. Because I was going to say that a lot of betas, the percentage of spouses of driven entrepreneurs that are depressed and on antidepressants is skyrocketing. And you have to ask the question, why, if we have everything, is there so much depression? And that is because the victim card is a very good passive aggressive manipulation tool. How can I get him to see me? I have to go to the opposite, the extreme. I can't be more fun than the business. So I'm going to be the extreme opposite. I'm going to be super needy. I'm going to be dysfunctional. I'm not going to be able to keep my life together, right? But then when you discover that that's you boundaryless and a mess, and you come back to that messy middle, a lot of women get stuck there, and that's where you look so angry.
From a man's point of view, we are just baffled. Just tell us what you need. We'll do it. And this bafflement of, this blank stare back that men get, when we ask spouses, what do you need? I don't know. It's like, well, then I'm screwed. No matter what I do, you're not happy with it. And no matter what I ask, you won't tell me just what you need. So how does the man see that without, and then she's pissed. The other thing that I see very commonly is they want us to contain them, but the moment we offer the container, they don't want it. They get pissed that we're trying to contain them, and yet they won't set their own boundaries with us. And so we're just floundering. And so as they start to develop their boundaries in their self, if I can get the guy to shut the hell up and actually go in a collaborative process of exploration with her. But our experience is they don't like that either, because then it's, you're just trying to solve the problem. And it's like, well, what do you want me to do?
So I would say that she probably is saying it, and there's something that gets lost in translation. And my partner and I play with this all the time, because he'll say something and what I hear is so radically different, and we just look at each other and laugh. And he's like, he's like, how do things just go missing in this house? Like entire toolkits just go vanish. Like, how does it happen? And the next thing I told my kid is, Joe thinks we lose all his stuff. So we got it. He's like, I never said that. So there is a little bit of a translation that goes on. And when I go through the Rolodex and I listen to all of my spouses in this area, I have told him he doesn't want to do it. I have told him I need him to be present when I go on vacation. I don't want to crop dust through cities. I want to sit leisurely at a cafe and people watch and hold hands. And that's like nails on a chalkboard to him. So I'm just not going to say it anymore. And so when I'm talking to the husbands, I'm like, one of the most masterful skills you can develop as an entrepreneur is boredom. Marriage is boring on a day-to-day basis. Marriage is boring. And when it starts to get plateaued, there's a fire, there's a crisis. So just leaning into being at a cafe and street walking, and even though in your Rolodex of your mind, there's a million other things you could be doing, this is also the energy where disruption happens. When you're outside of your normal thrash and dash, you can get one idea that clicks in your business. And so a lot of times I have to give them perspective or context on other byproducts besides just having coffee on the Paris cafe.
It's an old 12-step saying that when you finally figure out that boredom is actually serenity.
Yeah, right.
Things get a lot easier. And I always joke about, the game Sorry, when my kids were little, you little clicker button in the middle and single dice, sure. And you're going to move it one through. Just whoever created that was it's just a horrible experience. But if I have something to look forward to and I know I'm going to get my dopamine in 4 hours, mm-hmm. Then I can become much more curious about how is it actually to play?
Yeah.
How is it to sit with your wife and people watch? What is it like to live behind her eyes at the cafe? And trip balls on how different it is to be a woman. And it is, once a guy can do that, and that's what I always joke about, it feels like you're doing nothing and you're just kind of curious, asking questions, and it feels like you're getting on the edge of getting your ass handed to you at any second. And it is because you're not quite sure if she's happy, and then it leads to sex, and you're like, what the hell just happened?
Yes. Here's what just happened.
Blame that.
Intimacy. Into me you see. And when you can start to see life through her eyes, and you're intrigued and then fascinated, and it's like, oh, now I want you. Now she's feeling your life force come back into her. That's what she's been wanting. So when all of that life force has been going to the business and she's feeling more and more depleted, and all of a sudden you come back and you're like, I can't believe you just noticed that woman's shoes and how they match her purse. It's like, that's the most attention I've gotten in years. Oh, you know what else I can do? Look, I can see that window matches that. And all of a sudden it's like, he sees me, and all of her life force starts to come back online. Now that's the alchemy. That's exactly where the alchemy is. See, I can go stride for stride with you if you let me.
Yeah.
I need you to let me in.
And that
That's
permission
work
to be, the permission to be them is where they're going to find their needs and find their identity again.
Yes.
It's like a combination of doing driven work, right? Doug, you talk about sitting on that cushion and like wanting to jump off it, right? Driven's learning how to be in the present because that's the hardest thing for them. And Kelly, your work and the work that we're doing with Driven Spouse Forum is just helping spouses step by step find themselves of like, what's your favorite scent? What do you love to do? Who are you when you're on an island and nobody else exists, right? So if you got to do the work separately in order to be able to come back.
Yep, that's the whole premise of my program is it takes two happy, healthy people to create one happy, healthy relationship.
Yeah, the way I say it is there's no such thing as relationship issues. There's
Yeah,
only
right.
personal issues that get in the way of relationship. And
Exactly.
my issues match your issues. They get lost in that. Whose issue is this? It's
Sure.
It's ours. I play a part, you play a part.
Yep.
That is very commonly said. Is how do you get a woman to take responsibility for herself?
So when she's in complaint that her husband neglects her, betrays her, isn't paying attention to her, doesn't know her, yes, I know, I understand. And I go sit with her in that complaint and in that loneliness and in that betrayal. And as she becomes, I'm going to call fertile listening. I learned this from my coach, Casey Baker. Fertile listening is she becomes ready to hear the seed of wisdom, which is you betrayed yourself first. You neglected yourself first. You lost yourself first. You taught him how to treat you by doing all of these things to yourself first.
That Allison Armstrong in the Queen's Code, just, frog farmers, you training us to be the people that we are.
Yep. And this is where your boundaries come in. This is where your standards come in. This is where you loving yourself first. And I'm not talking about bubble baths and spa. I'm talking about knowing yourself, dabbling. What do you like? Do you like to be around horses, plants, solitude, books? Get to know yourself again. Like I have experiences where on a Saturday morning and I'm watering the plants, it feels like I'm making love to my house. And not in like a scent, like this is love when I'm cooking for my family, like this is making love. And in that energy, I start to know myself, that's self-love. So when you start to treat yourself like that and you start to condition everybody around you where your standards for treatment are.
Kelly, it's hard for women to, especially driven men, to feel like the mundane is this big thing because it's like, oh, you're just home, you're just watering the plants. And I also want to ask you, I have this suspicion that most driven guys are married to driven women, but they haven't found their drivenness yet because we correlate driven with entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
And we can do the driven assessments, and I've had a few spouses do that, and I see red weird shapes. So the guys have like big round circles, and the women have rocket ships and hearts. And it's because they're hyper focused type of drivens in different areas, and therefore they're not valued or recognized as much as driven. But they are moving mountains by putting up parties and keeping their kids in 5 different after school programs and decorating the house and all that. So speak to that.
I think you're exactly right. And this is why I love any kind of assessment that gives us better insight into ourselves and our partners. And to your point with the driven assessment, yes, like having perspective of, oh, she's not driven to make money, but she is driven to get her kids into the school, or to your point, have these great parties. Like, and when you can see her drive, oh yeah, she is, and so that can start to settle that hunger for a more driven partner. When you can see what she's driven in, it does start to settle that down a little bit. And so again, that goes back to the 2 stories that you're telling yourself. Are you married to somebody who's lazy or content because she's not starting 3 businesses when she could be? Or are you, married to a domestic goddess? She might be she might be like a sexual or sensual goddess, and you're just like, oh, she's just, you know, some horned up housewife, but you're missing what she's really looking to bring to the relationship or the marriage.
From the man's point of view, in my experience, once we start to become curious, really that curiosity and how much they have trained us to not see them. You know, they're trying to be invisible, trying to be, you know, if I have a need, you're just going to squish it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, our number one complaint, well, they just don't tell us what they need.
Yeah.
They try to, but we just go at problem solving, but we don't actually hear the real deeper emotional kind of content of them. And so, but once that happens, I've watched so many driven women that were they come back to life. And then they
Yeah,
have
because they're
like,
seen.
oh, maybe she's going to have it. It's a wonderful dynamic for him. It is, you know, because then he's just, you know, but trying to convince her that she doesn't need to open her own yoga studio and everything else. I mean, it is permission just to let her be on her path.
Going back to that point you just made about curiosity, you talk about it as being the space of questioning without judgment. And I think one of my favorite lessons that I've gotten in judgment is that it's a first cousin to shame. And when we have shame in ourselves, we automatically have judgment in others. And so a way to get away from judging your spouse is to work on your own shame. And this is for men and women, driven or not. When we can work on our own shame and dissolve our own shame, which happens through sharing, which happens through putting the light on it, doing the somatic body work to get the shame out of our bodies. As we resolve our own shame, we automatically release ourselves from judgment on others. So
that is so in this dynamic combination between men, in my experience, and just largely brain. I mean, there's evidence in the brain because we have the nearer corpus callosum, and when we are in our left hemispheres as men, we're not judging. We don't judge like you guys. We just don't. I mean, you guys can remember everything that ever. We like, I don't know, you know, we let it go. But your fear that we are judging you and that why is it that men, we're really clear that women do not work like us? I mean, you guys are different species.
Sure.
How do you get women to see how different men are?
I think we know, I think there's an undercurrent of judgment on, I'm going to say this as basic as possible, even though it's rude. I think women know how different we are and we judge it as incompetent. As politely said as I possibly can, because we're doing 100 things at once. Like, you know, when we go out of town and we come back and it's like, I kept the kids alive, but maybe the house is in total disarray, or, you know, things are like, hey, we run this system all the time. Like, why couldn't she do it for one day? And, or, you know, they want to fix everything. And so I think we know, but again, going back to that judgment of it being incompetent, like women, there is so much shame in womanhood. Weight, sexuality, working, kids, we are judged for everything. And so we carry an inordinate amount of shame that automatically translates to our judgment. So it's really paying attention to the programming of the shame that isn't yours. This shame that I chase my desires, and desire is a dirty word in my religion. This shame that I've gone through a divorce and that's a sin in my religion. All of these sins that happen or that are programmed into women, like getting really clear, like, this isn't mine. I'm actually not ashamed that I got a divorce. My religion tells me that I should be, my community tells me that I should be, but I'm actually not. So the more shame that we release from ourselves, especially women, whether it's body shame, sexuality shame, I chose not to have children shame, any of it. The more we release and get really clear what's not ours, the more
Freedom.
the less judging we have on our spouse.
It's like the ultimate intoxication is two shame-based personalities meeting.
Yeah, right.
Doug, you say that driven is shame-based personality.
Shame-based personality, and that underlying, you know, being seen, you know, in the alchemy, that I can see you more accurately than you see yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true for everybody on the planet, because I'm looking through my own self-judging emotional eyes at myself. And for a woman, you know, to really get a glimpse of what her husband sees in her when he is really seeing her for the first time, that curiosity, it is such a magic transforming moment that, you know, that supercharged energy. The guy did, we will go start another company. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
because I now, God, I can go home and not be scared that my balls are going to get busted. I mean, it's
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, it is incredible. And so that partnership. So how do we find you? You've written books, and I mean, how do we? We full of nuggets today. So you're gonna get blown up.
Thank you. You can find me at kellyclements.com. My book, Grow Your Business Without Growing Apart, is on Amazon. I also have a course by the same name that you can find at my website, or on Instagram or LinkedIn at Kelly Clements as well.
We're gonna have you back. This is fun.
I would love to. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is a blast.